I believe we are officially at a bottom in the cryptocurrency market. And if you watch this video till the end, you are going to see the exact charts and the exact macro data that I believe is going to prove that we are about to enter in a golden age for the cryptocurrency market. And the worst is behind us, guys. This is a video you are not going to want to miss. We are going to be going through a whole bunch of charts, macro data, as well as fundamental news that I believe will absolutely convince you that the next couple months in the cryptocurrency market are going to be extremely interesting. And I believe that means price action to the upside. Like, oh, your support means so much to this channel. Thank you to everyone who likes and subscribes. And with that said, let's jump right into it. And I hope you guys enjoy the content. So I want to start off this video and preface this start with a bunch of macro news that we just got dropped, because this is absolutely critical to everything we're going to be talking about. We just got PCE and core inflation data, which honestly was fairly in line with what we were expecting and fairly in line with the Federal Reserve's targets. We saw 2.8 on PCE. Core PCE was about 3. This was about what was projected. It's pretty much in line with what we were hoping to see. Now, what was much worse than initially anticipated was GDP. GDP is falling off a cliff right now, and you're probably wondering, why are you so excited about GDP falling off a cliff? Well, guys, let me show you what we're witnessing right now. The last print on GDP for the third quarter was 4.4% growth in GDP, and we just fell off a cliff to 0.5% growth in GDP. And that sounds terrible. That sounds like we're on the brink of a recession, potentially a depression at the rate in which we're falling. So you're probably wondering, how can I possibly be bullish about that number and that print? Well, the truth is the reason I am so bullish on that print is because that makes me ultimately full on convinced that we are going to have justification for rate cut. Now, if you take a look at the rate cut regime we're in right now, we peaked out on rates in essentially mid 2025, end of 2024, at about a 5.5% rate. Since then, we have already dropped all the way down to a 3.75% rate. Now, if you take a look at every single time we had rate cuts in the United States, we have had rates essentially free fall to nothing the last couple times the Federal Reserve cut. And I don't anticipate this time being any different. I fully expect we are going to end up cutting rates to almost nothing because, well, one, that has been the case every single time the Federal Reserve has cut rates since 2000. But additionally, Trump is literally telling you to your face that he wants 0% interest rates. In fact, he even floated the idea of negative interest rates. And he gets to pick the Federal Reserve chair who's about to come into power. And guess what? I don't think Trump is going to pick anyone who is not going to take rates down to almost nothing. Now, with that said, it would be one thing, right, if that was going against every single idea of what was a good idea, right? If we had growth that was going through the roof and then rapid inflation, look, it might be hard for any Federal Reserve chair to come in and cut rates. But now we're watching growth fall off a cliff. I mean, we just took a look at this, down almost 4 points, right? 4.4% growth to 0.5% growth is a massive fall off in growth. So Trump is going to hate that. Huge justification for cutting rates. But additionally, even maybe more importantly, take a look at inflation. Now, we are seeing some pretty sketchy stuff in the oil market that could mess this up a little bit. But guys, this green line is the Federal Reserve's target for inflation. Take a look at where inflation is right now. We are at literally the Federal Reserve's inflation target. So not only are we pretty much at 2% inflation, which is the Federal Reserve's inflation target, and I show the all-time chart here just to show you guys, we're never actually sitting at 2% on inflation. We're always fluctuating up and down. But if you're taking a look at where we are historically on inflation over the past 100 years and how close we are to in line with where we would expect, we're pretty much right where we would want to be on inflation data. So inflation is in line according to where we should be, but growth is falling off a cliff. There is only one way to essentially solve that or square that in terms of getting us out of what could potentially be a low growth or negative growth environment. And guess what? That is exactly in line with what Trump wants to do. What does Trump want to do? Trump wants to do what we do with interest rates every single time we cut and take them all the way back down here to 0%. Something super low, something that is going to make a massive growth engine in the United States. Now, when you fully understand what cutting rates, or if you fully understand why rate cuts are inevitable, whether that's the charting data, whether or not that's the lack of growth, whether that's inflation being in line, or whether that's in line with Trump literally saying that he wants zero interest rates and he's picking the next Federal Reserve president, if you can subscribe to that idea, then all you need to know is that the environment we are heading into for cryptocurrencies is going to be dramatically different. Over the past couple months and really over the last year, digital assets like XRP have performed despite the fact that rates weren't in an ideal place, right? Rates were relatively high, wasn't that good for growth assets like an asset like XRP, like an asset like Bitcoin. But XRP and Bitcoin really went on a run because there was so much opportunity, right? Despite the fact that interest rates were in a place where historically no one would want to allocate capital to an asset like XRP or Bitcoin, the truth is, well, when you're launching ETFs for an asset that has never had ETFs before, people are going to say, okay, well, even though the macro environment is absolutely terrible for me to be going into a growth asset, I'm going to do it regardless because the opportunity is so great on the fundamental news. But we kind of saw the fundamental news slow down a little bit, right? The clarity never really came through, and really there was just a lack of developments in the space. A lot of the things like the Bitcoin reserve never went through, and I think that just caused the market to stall out and the high interest rate regime to take over. But guys, now what I believe the market is pricing in is what we have been talking about, that we are about to have a huge flip in interest rate regime moving forward, and that is what I believe is creating a clear bottom in the cryptocurrency market. Guys, I want to show you the RSI for Bitcoin right now and how historical in a place we are right now. If you take a look at every single time the RSI has been oversold to where it is right now, you are looking at the absolute lows in the cryptocurrency market. So I'm going to draw a couple lines right here just to line things up for you and show you historically where we are. We have never been at the level of RSI we're at right now without indicating a long-term macro bottom on Bitcoin. So right now, if you take a look at the RSI, where we are now, and compare that to other times we have been in the cryptocurrency market, you are lining it up with every single absolute bottom that has ever existed in crypto. So not only, right, does it feel like it makes absolutely no sense where crypto is trading right now? We're hearing all this fundamental news. People are confused. It's like, okay, well, how can things be bearish when you're getting clarity coming in? You're getting these ETFs. Not only that, but right now, the charts are telling us we are right in that zone where we have historically traded at an all-time bottom for Bitcoin. And maybe even more exciting than that, because sometimes it can hang around these bottoms for a little bit of time, we're actually crossing the RSI moving averages, or we have already crossed that moving average down there. That has been an indicator that says the bottom is now firmly behind us and we're not going any lower. Sometimes you can kind of get a spike down and then one more tiny spike down below that, but we have already now crossed the moving average. That would say that the momentum has completely flipped now back up to the upside. Now, this is the Bitcoin chart leading the market, which Bitcoin always does. If you take a look at the XRP price chart in terms of XRP's bottom, we can see a very similar pattern emerging. Now, the XRP price chart hasn't crossed the RSI just yet. We're still waiting for XRP's price chart to cross that RSI and indicate the long-term bottom. But what we're seeing is the same exact trend. XRP is bottoming in the area that has represented the bottom in every single major XRP sell-off. So if you just take a look at this entire thing holistically, one, we are seeing the cryptocurrency market right now holding up fairly well, right? We are seeing good buy volume. We haven't seen any big bankruptcies. We haven't seen any big players fall apart. Generally, things have really looked pretty much par for the course for the cryptocurrency industry. Oh, wow, right? The fundamental catalysts moving forward have never looked better in terms of ETF volumes ramping up, in terms of clarity coming in terms of literally massive adoption from financial institutions of an asset class that is being legitimized and talked about the new rails of the financial system. Trump literally said those words today. The administration, from the OCC to the CFTC to the Treasury, are all talking about how important this asset class is going to be, not from a speculation standpoint, not from, oh, so we can throw 1% of our net worth, from the rails and plumbing of our financial system. That is what they are saying, not me. Not Mikkel. Hey, this asset class is going to be critical and fundamental to the financial system. That's not me. That is the Secretary Treasury of the United States. That is the OCC, the banking regulator. That is the CFTC, the commodity regulator. That is the SEC, the investment regulator. All saying the exact narratives we have been talking about on this channel for a while. And our narrative has not changed, right? Whether it was Gary Gensler saying this entire industry was a scam, to now where we have the most highly appointed officials in the United States government backing this up, that is a huge switch. That is no longer speculation. That is validation hitting us right now. And guys, that's all happening, right? As we are hitting this long-term bottom historical indicator on the price charts. But that's not it. As we talked about earlier in the video, this lines up perfectly from a long-term macro perspective as well. If we go into a regime, right, where interest rates are being slashed in front of us, we are dropping down to a 0% interest rate, 1% interest rate, whatever, right? Low interest rates. That is going to be pouring gasoline on the cryptocurrency fundamental fire that has already been lit. If we get moving into the summer, the Clarity Act passed, which I fully expect to be passed, and we get Trump putting in a Federal Reserve chair who is not only going to do what the macro data is telling him to do, but on top of that, why Trump is hiring him, we are not only going to have a situation where we are having cryptocurrency go from a niche speculative asset class to a systemically important financial technology, but at the same exact time, we are going to have the Federal Reserve taking a massive thing of gasoline and dumping it all over that adoption with huge liquidity being pumped into the system. Guys, I believe not only are we seeing macro data that is aligning perfectly for the future of XRP, not only are we seeing fundamental adoption news that validates every single thing that we have been talking about for the past 5 to 10 years, but we are also seeing the charts of these assets themselves triggering at historical places that have never not represented a long-term bottom. I believe all of these things together, right, outside of some insane, unexpected, total world event, right, that I don't think will take place, we are right now at a generational opportunity, a reset for the next stage of growth in the cryptocurrency market. Guys, I have never been more convinced that the next 12 months are going to be absolutely explosive for this industry. And looking back at it, I think it will just go without saying that this was nothing more than the last big shakeout event prior to that event that we have all been forecasting for the mass institutional adoption of a technology that we have seen doing what it is about to do for years before in the past. Everything is aligning absolutely perfectly, and I believe we are at the point where it all comes together in one of the most explosive ways we have ever seen in this industry. Thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed this update. For now, Mikkel out.